Shoot the Breeze topic number 1 says, do you agree that Africa can become, quote unquote, heaven within a 5-year span with the right leadership? How is this leadership to be envisioned? This came with a link, of course. Let me see if I could find the controls here, because StreamYard changed some things. Let me see if I could figure this out on the fly. Okay, there it is. Let me share my screen with you. This came with an attachment that's taken us oddly to LinkedIn. I don't really get my news from LinkedIn, so it's kind of strange to see it. But let me just read this article to you guys. You guys can see my screen. It says it's from Alamin Sanyang's post, who's the managing editor at The Watch Gambia. It says the richest black person in the world, Aliko Dangote, said on Thursday that Africa has the potential to become quote-unquote heaven within 5 years if the continent embraces the right policies, investments, and leadership. Speaking at the Africa Investment Forum in Lagos, Dangote, Africa's richest man, said the continent must prioritize industrialization, infrastructure, development, and regional integration to unlock its full economic potential. Quote, Africa is not poor. Africa is poorly managed, Dangote said during a panel discussion. With discipline, vision, and collaboration, we can turn this continent into heaven in the next 5 years. Dangote, whose conglomerate spans cement, agriculture, and oil refining, said regional trade barriers and weak logistics continue to limit growth across African markets. He urged governments to fully implement the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is the AfCFTA, and support private sector-led development. The 67-year-old Nigerian industrialist has long advocated for African self-sufficiency. His 650,000 barrels per day oil refinery, recently commissioned in Nigeria, is seen as a major step towards reducing the continent's reliance on imported petroleum products. Quote, we need to manufacture what we consume and create jobs for our youth. The opportunity is enormous, but the window is closing, he said. Dangote's remarks drew both praise and skepticism on social media, with some describing the 5-year timeline as overly ambitious, given ongoing challenges in governance, security, and infrastructure across the region. Africa's population is expected to reach nearly 1.7 billion by 2030, with the continent projected to account for over 40% of the global workforce by 2100, according to the United Nations. Dangote said failure to act now would lead to missed opportunities for future generations. He further remarked that the future is in the hands of Africans, and no one will develop Africa for Africans except Africans themselves. This is Aliko Dangote, or Dangote, I can't remember the pronunciation. He said Africa can become, quote unquote, heaven in 5 years with the right leadership. I'm going to leave that image right there as we have this discussion. Before we get into the discussion, Afro Native World says Bibi Fahodie will be catching the replay. All right, thanks for letting us know. Trigger 262 Plus says, notice the people saying this and their vision of development. It's for their interest, but certainly not ours. African people need strong vision when it comes to our development. Too much copy and paste. I agree with you. When I read this, Trigger Happy, I had the thought of, this guy is a capitalist. And so he's advocating for capitalism. I wonder, well, maybe I should leave that alone. But I do wonder, who has he exploited? What would they say as far as continental Africans go? But I have one panelist with me so far. A great panelist at that. That would be Kofi. the Black Critic. First of all, Kofi, how are you this week?
I'm doing good, Coco. I'm doing good. How are you? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm hanging in there. Thanks for coming through bright and early. Um, so you heard that whole article. What are your thoughts? Do you agree that Africa can become heaven within a 5 year span?
Well, I'm going to first off and say Africa is heaven. I'm not going to say Africa could become heaven.
True that.
Africa, Africa become more lucrative for its people. And you and Trigger Happy took the words right out of my mouth. Is like heaven, and whose vision of heaven are we talking about? Really, really here. And I like the copy and paste reference because when we're talking about Africa as a whole, another thing I would like to get a little bit more into the article. We talk about Africa as a whole. We talk about all of sub-Saharan Africans, obviously not North Africa, right? So again, my ideology, my question would be, what do they mean by heaven? Now, it seems like there's a lot of economical implications there that needs to happen, which I totally agree. But to whose benefit? That it's always to whose benefit. If you have the right people, again, he was right. You have the right people in mind. You have the right minds in mind. Then yes, Africa could have her own resources and or for own resources, benefit from own resources, right? As she should be. But again, who's going to be in charge of all this? All economics majors say this, right? There was like a year back, there was forgot the name of the guy's name. Some white dude, big economist, says like the Africa has so much potential and is going to be leading the world in industry. You know what I'm saying? If it's done right, if you don't have crony capitalism. So there's nothing wrong being a capitalist. We're in a capitalist society. Africa was a capitalist society. There's nothing wrong with that because all capitalism is nothing but trading, bartering, selling services, providing services, and things of that nature. Right. So if Africa has all that, Africa has always been in trading and bartering, whether it be from calves, cattle, skins, spices, whatever it may have you. We were always involved in that. The problem is, since the invasion of the Arabs and the invasion of the Europeans, now we know the dynamic has changed a little bit. So right now we are we think like Europeans right now when it comes to governance. We think like Europeans because as colonized people, we don't have our ancestors say, okay, look, this is what we need to go back to. This is how we this is how we did it. We're not like the Jews that that whoa is me for 4 years, right? And that they were being decimated. But guess pretty much that's what it is there. The question is, the devil's in the details as far as like what is he talking about? Africa could be heaven. Whose heaven are we talking about? And I'll pretty much end it there.
Yeah, that's a good commentary there, Kofi. Um, I like that you made the distinction. Although me personally, I don't um I don't make the distinction anymore. But you made the distinction of crony capitalism. I think all capitalism now at this point is crony capitalism and capitalist imperialism at this point, right? But in our ancient ways of doing things, we had a healthy dose of what some would consider socialism, that Ubuntu kind of mindset. And that's not being practiced here by Dangote, in that he's talking about continuing the colonial project. He's talking about just continuing the way things are done, the mode of production. That's not beneficial to African people. It doesn't get them out. It doesn't get the average African person out of the hole that they're in, not only on the continent, but worldwide. One of my favorite Pan-Africanists is Amilcar Cabral, probably like up there just under Gavi. And one of the things Amilcar Cabral says, and I'm paraphrasing heavily, here is that, we're not here for the ideas in people's head. We're really here to see the prosperity of our people, our children, our grandchildren. And I think about that quote probably every day. I should be better at repeating it verbatim by now, but the gist of it is like all these different ideas, theorems, theories and theorems and philosophies. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what is going to allow our people to see prosperity on an individual level, on a family level, on a regional level, a continental level, on a worldwide level? Like, what's going to allow us to see prosperity, to see self-determination? And unfortunately, the capitalists in Africa are just like the capitalists from Europe.
But hold on, I'll push back on that because see, the capitalists in Europe, at least the capitalists in Europe will be for the benefit of rich white people. The capitalists in Africa is it wants to be rubbing elbows with rich white people. You know what I'm saying? I don't think someone, let's say like a Steve Jobs, a Bill Gates, or a Jeff Bezos will say, you know what? If I do this particular policy, it would decimate Europe on the masses of white people. They're not going to do that. They can look for another way to look money. The wrong people in power in Africa will be like, oh, but I'm getting money. I don't care about the little people. Let me throw in some crumbs or whatever. I get to rub elbows with the white man. I get to drive me a Mercedes Benz and a BMW and get this foreign this and foreign that because white ice is colder. So I think there's nothing wrong with capitalism. I always ask people. That's why I use the word crony capitalism because there's nothing wrong with capitalism done right. You know what I'm saying? Crony capitalism is just corrupt capitalism that only benefits rich people and the common people doesn't reap the benefits of that. You know what I'm saying? So when I ask people if we're not going to use capitalism in a global capitalist society where things is measured by GDP and things of that nature, like what else is there? Well, how are you going to do it? There's no country that is a part of BRICS that is not a part of a capitalist society. You see what I'm trying to say? We could do it, but do it right. We could, chew gum and walk at the same time, so.
Right. Hold that thought, Kofi, because I have a follow-up question to this prompt for you.
All right.
that I like you and I to discuss. First, let me just read a couple of comments here along those lines. Cheryl says, it sounds good, but we don't want to do, but what we don't want to do is continue industrialism in the same way the non-blacks do it. I agree 100%. Trigger Happy 262 Plus says, even the industry aspects, we discussed it before when it concerned the mass production of medicine to our people. The way we industrialize and mass produce has to be completely different. Cheryl asks, what system did ancient Kemet use? Was it capitalism? It wasn't. It probably was.
It was capitalism. It was capitalism. It was trading and bartering. They traded with the people of the South with skins. When you see on the walls of chemists, you see that they have leopard skins. There's no leopards in North Africa. There's a lot of things that they have that they traded. So we got to look past capitalism basically being a money exchange. That's no disrespect to you, sister. I'm not saying you're thinking small minded, but the big people think of when they think of capitalism, they think of what goods and services can I have on the open market that's transferable. If we only bartering and trading and just say U.S. currency only has a particular cost. The dollar has a particular cost on the market. But when you have gold, you can name your price. Even gold has a price, but you can name your price. And then everybody wants to get that particular price. So, but the big wigs think services and goods and raw material.
So to continue and thanks for that, Kofi. To continue with some of the comments, because this is leading me into my follow-up discussion on this topic. Trigavi says, remember the quote from African Science that spoke about caring about the quality of a product being good for the consumer and the people instead of the seller. Same with industrializing, absolutely. He said, yep, all capitalism is bad. When some of our people are concerned about making money in business, he just means commerce. Commerce should be concerned for the greater good of building our people. He said capitalism is a system that will always default to profit. Yeah, because capitalism, crony capitalism, which is why I say at this point it's all crony capitalism. I don't see a benevolent capitalist society except maybe if you look in Denmark or something like that. But it's all crony capitalism now.
Yeah, but
Lastly,
I'll ask Trigger Happy. I'm sorry, I want to ask Trigger Happy. How do you have commerce without capitalism? To me, they're just synonyms of the same thing. But this a curious question I just want to put out there.
all right, I'll let Trigger respond to that. He says white people under capitalism, in which a heavy social net becomes involved, requires the exploitation of counties outside of their region, which is why it's never benevolent, I would say. Okay. Cheryl says, so trading of goods is capitalism. Trigabi says, that's just commerce, I would argue. Every time business was done, they broke up money power and used that money to redistribute the wealth. So that leads me to the question here. The prompt asks, can we have a heaven in 5 years? Dan Goat gives his analysis. We don't really vibe with it because we understand that he's a Nigerian businessman, a capitalist, putting profits over people. But what would it take? There's a question of leadership in this as well. What would it take? What would a leader, let's say if Cheryl was the leader, if Trigger was the leader of an African country, if Kofi was the leader of an African country, this is how I want people to respond to this. What would you look to do in the next 5 years to solidify, because Kofi made a good point, Africa is heaven for us, to solidify Africa as this heaven? What would you guys do? So you guys in the chat can respond and answer this question, but I'm talking to Kofi. Kofi, what are your thoughts on, if it's not industrialism, if it's not industrialism in the European purview, if it's not capitalism as it is crony capitalism, what could we do, you think, in the next 5 years, if you were the leader of an African country? What would you want to do to make that country heaven on earth?
That's again. Thank you for that question. That's a very good question. The leadership of Ibrahim Tori, what he's doing, he's doing so much monumental work because he's tapping in to the resources and the people. So I don't know if I mentioned it here or when Wademaya went into there, he went in there and they have a tomato farm and they have a tomato plant. They're hiring people in Burkina Faso to run the tomato plant, right? So now they have a tomato plant, they packaged it and everything. All they gotta do is go to the market and sell it. You have to have the mind of an Ibrahim Traoré, a Patrice Lumumba, even a Kwame Nkrumah. You have to have this where your love is for the people and you're showing it, right? You're investing in the people. Like China is a contender in the global market as far as like technology, trade, and bartering. 50, 60 years ago, China was not, you wouldn't be talking about China in that way. What did China do? China's like, look, we have a lot of people. We can utilize our people to have a workforce. So, I mean, in the industry that I'm in supply chain and purchasing and things of that nature. Usually when you get like Chinese products, like technical products and stuff like that, some of it is not the best, but it's in the market. You know what I'm saying? It's in the market, depending what you need. You know what I'm saying? It's in the market. So they're able to mass produce so much that they have that people are buying it, whether it's high quality, low quality, or anything in between. So if the first thing I would do was to build my military, build intelligence, right? And also, again, depending on my country, what natural resources they have, tap into those resources, get a factory on built. So if it's cocoa or whatever, you know what I'm saying, get like some harvesting on machines and people of that nature. If it's cobalt or iron or anything like that, get mining equipment and things of that nature, and get the people to work those mines. And if it's oil, you have people to drill the oil and refine the oil. Don't take no. Why are you sending it out of the country for it to be refined? Do it right here. It's cheaper. No way you're gonna beat me in the head. Oh, it's a lot of money. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's gonna save me money. So I'm drilling the oil here. You send the oil back to shore, refine it, and then we'll send it out to market. You know what I'm saying? It takes someone that is not selfish, that is not greedy, that is not egotistical, that and intelligent, that knows that the betterment of my country is the betterment for me. There's enough to go around to make me happy. The investors, I get in investors, especially Black African investors, that it's going to benefit us. And make sure, and also if you have investors, make sure the deal is good. I'll give you like a anecdotal, somewhat of an anecdotal description idea. So when I went to Jamaica, and I heard like when I was in Jamaica, they said that the chicken in the KFC chicken in Jamaica is different. It's better than the one in the States. So I went there, and the Jamaican guy told me, he was giving me the history about KFC chicken. So he said, so when KFC came here and said, hey, do you want a KFC here in Jamaica? They were like, yeah, let's have a KFC in Jamaica. They signed a contract. Okay, you can do this. You're going to follow this because it's a franchise, yada, yada, yada. Oh, and the chicken. Oh, we'll give you the chicken. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Why are you giving us chicken in Jamaica like we don't have farms and we don't have chickens? No, we use our own chickens. We use our own poultry on factories. I'm not going to pay you extra money to get chicken that we have already. That's what we need. That's what we need. That's the okie doke when African countries are making deals. You might not have a person that's intelligent. You may have a person that they say, hey man, just give you a couple of dollars under the table. Just do business with us. We don't need that. That's what I would do. For stars and beginners, if I was in charge of a mineral resource rich country in Africa that would benefit Africa and all its people.
We're gonna call you Kofi Traore from now on. I agree with everything. I agree with everything you have to say, as well as a lot of what's being said in the chat. By the way, Daily Affirmations by Pauline immediately said I would follow Ibrahim Traore. And to do that means a lot of the things you're going to hear from Trigger Happy while I run down these comments, but you got to seize the resources, nationalize everything. Trigger Happy says the first thing I would do is be realistic in realizing that a totalistic heaven within 5 years wouldn't be achieved immediately, but within 5 years span, let me scroll down, I would want to help build the education system, to build the scientists and people we need to help manage the industrialization process from an African-centered perspective. That echoes what Kofi was saying as well. He says, in the meantime, though, you have to seize all the resources and nationalize them. That's the first order of business. Trade relations with AES should also be established as soon as possible. Well done. Just to go back up, Cheryl said, in my understanding, just because the desire to have a certain good is in high demand doesn't mean it benefits the group as a whole. Isn't capitalism partially based off wants and desire? The thing with capitalism is, Cheryl, if we're honest, it pushes wants and desires. For example, what's a good example? Oil, for example, or gas. Gas could be $2 a gallon. Some news person comes up and says, oh, that looks like there's going to be some fracas going on in Iraq. All of a sudden, gas is $6, $7 a gallon, right? They can artificially turn up the price, which is funny. They never turn it back down in most cases, but it's artificial is what I'm trying to say. So that even supply and demand is artificial, really. They can push that. You know what I mean? So that's why we got to get back into our own systems. Let's get with the things that people really need, right? Like I talked about Emil Cabral. People want to see their children prosper and grow and see themselves be able to live an enjoyable life. Those are the things, the needs that help with that. That's what we need to be more focused on. A couple more comments here. Capitalism generally benefits from dissatisfaction too. That's true. Which you could create that dissatisfaction. You know what I mean? Trigger says, yep, you can. You need to manage the taste of people in order for them to keep buying things. I ran into a tweet that said that capitalism benefits from the insecurities of women in order to buy things. That's a true statement. Earlier, when Kofi was talking about KFC in Jamaica, which I don't know if a lot of people notice. If I'm not mistaken, I think KFC in Jamaica, which is a shame in a sense, in a Houston, I think KFC in Jamaica is voted the number one. I think Jamaican KFCs is voted the number one KFCs in the hemisphere. And I think Trinidad is high up there, and I think the Bahamas is somewhere up there as well. Maybe Guyana too, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, they got Starbucks in Guyana too, so I won't pass it that they have a KFC. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Starbucks reached down there now, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I understand in the Bahamas because we're so close. And our whole thing is tourism, so they gonna want the shit that they
that they want in the that they have in the States.
Right. But further down, I'm really surprised Guyana has a Starbucks.
Yeah, I was surprised too. I was like, what?
That's wild stuff, man. But yeah, I think everything you guys have said here, I think is important. Is an important mindset, and this is what we have to discuss with the youth, because as we've been always told, the children are the future. The youth is the future. The youth have to have this mindset. What Kofi put down here, what Trigger have put down here, we need our 18-year-olds thinking that way.
I mean, I told my son that, like, I took my son. It's a little bit off topic. I took my son to the dentist, and I took my sons to the dentist, and one of my sons finished before the other ones did. He's like, "Dad, can I just go sit in the car?" No. He said, "Dad, can I take a walk?" I said, "No," and he didn't understand why I said it, because the neighborhood I'm in Queens, and the neighborhood that I'm in is a pretty much dominant white Asian community where my dentist was. So I told him, the only reason why I told him, to make a long story short, is that, you don't think it's not that I don't trust you. I don't trust the world. And I said, when you grow up, and no matter what you want to do, we're here in the States, but you have to think broader than United States, as a place where when you have children, you won't have to give them this talk. Where you could be and do wherever you want, and don't have to feel threatened, or have to second guess where you are. So, so always keep in mind, when you become an adult and you look at going, if you're either working with somebody or you're going to business for yourself, it doesn't have to be here. It could be a place where people look like you and me, and where you could have your own paradise, how it's meant to be. So I just wanted to add that.
Good stuff. I'm glad you're teaching those youth that, man. That's why I teach my sons this stuff all the time, man. Because, we are, let me speak for myself. I think Kofi and I are about the same age. We are getting old now, man. We're getting older, and it's likely not going to be guys like us who are seizing a state, like Traore. I think Traore is like, what, 33, 34, something like that?
Yeah, he's in his 30s, yeah.
Yeah, he's still in his 30s. I'm pushing 50.
Me too.
You know what I'm saying? So it's for the youth. It's for, I was looking at, it's funny, I happened to look at the demographics of the people, the age of people that listen to this show earlier today. And it's like,
you're looking at your analytics, yeah.
Yeah, it's like 34 to, I want to say 50 or something like that. And there's nothing below 34. And I said, I gotta do something to change that in the coming years, because the young folks need to start getting this in them. While they still have the creativity, they still have that fervor, they have that energy. They got to start getting some of this because you might end up in a situation where you need to build a nation. You might end up in a situation like that. And so, yeah,
Well, some people, I mean, what you're saying is absolutely true. That's why I don't really don't knock people like, I mean, I don't agree with them on certain things like O'Shea Duke Jackson, and people's like, oh, they don't like his celebrity junk. But I see what he's doing, right? And he has to there's nothing wrong with talking about this, but other people, yeah, it's human nature. It's not just black people. People like salacious news. They want to know if the Knicks was going to win this year. They want to know what's going on, what like celebrity stuff like Love Island, what's Beyonce doing and stuff like that. And sometimes you have to incorporate that. When I do my show, I kind of do that a little bit, not into the whole celebrity stuff, but I try to make it like fun, but still interesting. You know what I'm saying? Because what we're talking about, like you say, Koku, this is nation building. Nation building is not always a fun thing to do that's exciting. So you'll need to get very mature minds to do that. That's why your analytical algorithm is like that, because we're talking about grown people things. You know what I'm saying? This is a grown mind. This is a grown mind thing. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna look at, you know what I'm saying, some TikTok on some nonsense. So yeah.
Yeah. So but it's always good for us to challenge ourselves, even though we might be getting older, to challenge ourselves as to how do we connect with the youth more, not necessarily the 14 and 15-year-olds, but how do we get to those 21-year-olds, those guys and gals who are maybe just coming out of college or you know, around that age, rubbing shoulders with people who are thinking and doing,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean? So that's
Yeah.
something to think about in the future, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
we could probably change. I mean, it's about this. My suggestion, like, keep the content pretty much the same, but make it tuned in a little bit more to them. You know, you got to use some bait. You got to use some intellectual bait to get them. You know, get their minds, get their brains turning. You know.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Last comment before we move on to the next topic. Cheryl says, Starbucks and KFC, two things we don't need, with the laughing emoji. Trigger says all of those will be banned in his world, like mine's. But that goes back to our vision of industrialization. Fast food exists because Americans are constantly on the move due to the need for quick labor. We have to counter it. Yeah, we do have to counter it. I'll tell you a real quick story. When I was in high school back home, around the corner from my high school was a Popeyes. And I'm not lying to tell y'all, I thought Popeyes was a Bahamian chicken fast food place. I
What? Really?
Yeah, I thought Popeyes was a Bahamian spot until I came to the States and realized, oh shit, no, that's here. That's from here.
Yeah,
I
Louisiana.
Yeah, because back then I don't feel like this is in, you know, I graduated high school in '93, so this is back then. I don't think it said Louisiana chicken. I'm pretty sure it didn't. It just said Popeyes. But you come to realize later on that this is how they start to get you. This is a part of that whole colonization thing. They push these little things in these countries, right? Like we have McDonald's. I knew that was an American thing for sure, but they push these little things in, and you start to run to these things because they're new and they're seemingly different, and you start to ignore the things that you have. Like we have something back home in the Bahamas called chicken in the bag. Chicken in the bag is fried chicken, French fries, and a dinner roll, right? In a brown bag, grease coming through the bag. You know what I mean? Bahamian style food. And when some of these Popeyes and things came in, people kind of abandoned their own Bahamian style food, which was open till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and started running to Popeyes and stuff like that, and ignored and ignored their own, and that's a shame. And this is why I agree with Trigger that me personally, I would get them the F up out of my state, my country. You know what I mean? I would make sure to invest heavily in the local food customs. You know what I mean? Bring back grandma and them recipes and all that kind of stuff like that. That's why I would to trigger Abby's question, is the food cooked differently? Always. The reason why Jamaica and the Caribbean and all that has quote unquote good KFC is because we season the chicken the way we usually season
Our
meat.
food at home, yeah.
Right. And so by the time we add there, what was it, nine
7 herbs and spices or whatever or something.
yeah, 7 herbs and spices. By the time we add that, the chicken was good already. We already did
Yeah.
that. You know?
My only pushback on the whole first thing, because usually, like, I guess my experience is different because, especially my wife, like, we because I'm so Americanized, it's like my mother will hardly go out to get food to eat. The only time you get food to eat, if you're like outside, like fast food, if you're on vacation, right? You're not sitting home and say, "Oh, give me some McDonald's." Like, what? Why this chicken in the freezer, man? Defrost it, cook it. You know what I'm saying? No one's doing that. You know what I'm saying? But another thing I also want to push back onto is that there was always fast food. I guess maybe you guys talk about the fast food of today, but there was always fast food. You know what I'm saying? We have like little appetizers. Like me, I'm Guyanese. We'll have pine tart, chicken foot, salara.
Sure.
Certain things you have that you get. Like street vendors. But like my father. My father old. He old, and he old school. I've never seen my father eat a hamburger, a piece. He'll sit there and just look at you. Man, that thing junk food. Enjoy your junk food. To him, it's junk food. My father, raised in Brooklyn, he'll take me to the Guyanese or a Caribbean bakery. Buy here, eat some sweet bread. You want some? Here's some bun and cheese or something. That's what he would eat. Eat some salary, eat some matai or something like that. You know what I'm saying? He's not gonna sit there and eat a pizza. He's not gonna sit there and eat a donut. He does not eat them things. So I see what you guys saying because we were raised in our old ways. And me, I was raised, being that always. But we do. Look, the world is getting bigger. There's going to be things that people are going to have that's going to incorporate into your society, into your culture. I think our line of playing here basically is that we always have to remember our culture and who it is. Don't let another culture overrun or diminish the culture that you have.
Well said. Good punctuation to this prompt. I hope that the young and the old have listened to this conversation here based on what Dan Goatee had to say. And I hope that we are internalizing these ideas so that if and when it's our chance, we know what to do when that time comes. Let's go to Shoot the Breeze, topic number 2 tonight. It's only Kofi and I tonight, it looks like. I know Buana has some things going on family-wise, so that's maybe why he's not here tonight. But shout out to all you guys who